All right, let's dive into Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. You guys sent over some seriously interesting excerpts from his audiobook, read by Tolle himself,
Yeah.
and
Going straight to the sources.
yeah, why not, right? It seems like a lot of our listeners are already familiar with, the general idea, like being present and all that, but what I found so interesting in these excerpts is how Tolle gets there. Like his own story
Yeah,
is.
definitely not your average self-help guru
Yeah.
origin story.
Like waking up at 29, just like in utter despair
And
and
being pulled into a void or somehow.
exactly. Okay, so Tola talks about this pretty intense experience where he's just overwhelmed by this like feeling of meaninglessness, and he describes it as this vortex, like a vortex of nothingness. And then it's in that moment of like super intense suffering that something shifts for him.
Yeah, his consciousness just like totally transforms.
Exactly. And what's so fascinating is that that experience kind of becomes like the basis of his whole philosophy. It's like he's saying that sometimes you have to like hit rock bottom to break through to a new level of
Awareness.
yes, it really makes you wonder if we're always trying to avoid like discomfort, are we maybe missing out on opportunities for
Huge growth.
right.
That's a
That's a big question.
Yeah, it is, and it leads us to one of Tolle's most uh I guess you could say like bold claims. He says that the mind itself, like the thing we rely on for, well, everything, can be the biggest obstacle to experiencing the present moment.
He even calls it a disease, which is quite a statement.
Yeah, talk about a wake-up call, right?
But it's easy to think he's exaggerating. But then when you really think about it, like how much time do we spend rehashing the past, worrying about the future, or just like, all these negative thoughts? It makes you wonder.
Yeah, and this is where I think the idea of the pain body comes in, right? Like
Mm.
all this past emotional pain that we just kind of carry around with us,
Yeah.
often unconsciously. Yeah, and it's almost like this invisible baggage that's always there, and um, it can really influence, our perceptions and our actions and even our
Relationships. And
yeah,
he uses this kind of scary analogy. He compares it to like a monster lurking in the shadows that's afraid of
the light of consciousness.
wow, that's pretty powerful imagery.
It is.
So how does this pain body actually show up in our lives? Like, what does it look like?
Well, I think, like think about those times when you get triggered by something really small or you keep making the same mistakes over and over again or you find yourself in the same unhealthy relationships. That could be the
The pain body. And,
yeah,
and this goes back to the idea of the mind being the enemy, right?
right.
Because if we're not even aware of this pain body, we're going to keep getting stuck in those.
Repetitive thoughts and behaviors.
Exactly. And Tolle actually says that most of our thinking is just useless chatter, just mental noise that distracts us from,
The present moment.
yeah. How much of that do you experience in your own life?
Oh, it's definitely something I have to be mindful of.
For sure, for sure. So how do we even start to like identify those patterns, those as Tolle calls them, mind strategies that keep us from being present?
Well, he talks about these two states of unconsciousness, ordinary and deep unconsciousness. And so, like, ordinary unconsciousness is, think of it as like, when you're doing the dishes or you're stuck in traffic and you feel this like unease,
Oh, okay.
like a restlessness,
Mm.
yeah. And then deep unconsciousness is more like when you're completely overwhelmed by, like a huge problem or a difficult situation, and it's causing you a lot of anxiety and fear.
And both of those are fueled by what Tolle calls mind strategies.
Right. And they're all about avoiding the now.
Yeah.
And they can look like, complaining or worrying or dwelling on the past or even like, fantasizing about the future. And it's all these different ways of
Escaping the present moment.
exactly. And it's not that he's saying we should, ignore problems or pretend everything's fine, but he's just pointing out that our habitual way of thinking can often just create more
Suffering.
yes. Which makes you wonder if we could just like hit the pause button on all that mental noise, what would happen? What kind of I don't know, like what would we experience?
Yeah, and that's where it gets really interesting because he talks about these portals, these gateways to a deeper
A deeper reality.
yeah. And that's what we're going to get into next time.
All right, I'm intrigued. Let's talk portals.
Welcome back. So last time we were just starting to get into those portals to presence that Tolle talks about. Did any of those
I have to admit, the idea of like portals to a deeper reality, it kind of sounded a little out there at first.
Yeah, it's easy to get hung up on the image, but I think what he's really getting at is more about like shifting your perception.
Right, like
Jump.
adjusting the lens you're looking through.
Hmm.
Exactly. And one of those portals, like one we can access anytime, is the sensation of space.
Space.
Yeah. And I don't just mean physical space. Like, although being aware of your surroundings can be helpful, it's more about, like noticing the space within your body or the space between your thoughts or even the
Space between breasts.
yes, it's like instead of focusing on the stuff in your awareness, you're focusing on the background.
Well, that's interesting. So like shifting your focus from the content to the container.
Exactly. And what's cool is that by becoming aware of that space,
Mm-hmm.
you naturally create a sense of stillness, like a
Oh.
spaciousness within.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like stepping back from all that mental chatter.
Right. And it's incredibly liberating because suddenly you're not so caught up in those thoughts and emotions.
You can see them more objectively.
Yeah. And that brings us to another portal, the inner body.
Oh, yeah, the inner body. I love how he describes it as like a doorway to being.
It really is.
And he says it's something that's available to us, no matter how old we are, what kind of.
Physical condition.
Yeah, but how do we actually like access it? It seems kind of abstract.
You're already experiencing it all the time.
Yeah.
Like the feeling of your breath or the weight of your body on a chair or even
The warmth of the sun.
yeah, all those sensations.
So it's about being present to our physical experience in the moment.
Exactly. And the more you cultivate that awareness, the more you connect with this sense of aliveness and
Groundedness.
yes. And it goes beyond the mind,
Hmm.
like it's not dependent on what your mind is doing.
And then there's surrender, which we touched on earlier. It's like this ultimate portal, like letting go of all control.
It's interesting how we often think of surrender as weakness, but Tolle says it's
An
actually,
act of courage.
yeah, because it requires us to face our fears and those beliefs about how things should be.
And just trust that even if things don't go as planned, there's a deeper intelligence, like guiding things.
Yeah, it's recognizing that we're not always in control, and sometimes the best thing we can do is yes, exactly. And he uses this really cool analogy of a thick fog to describe it. So the fog represents like your life situation with all those worries and uncertainties, and then your conscious presence is like a flashlight that cuts through it.
I like that.
And surrender allows that flashlight to shine even brighter because you're not wasting energy fighting the fog. You're just accepting it.
Right, but that doesn't mean we become passive or just give up, right? It's about accepting what is.
So that we can respond from a place of,
Clarity and presence.
yeah, and he actually gives us a way to know if we've truly surrendered. He says, ask yourself, is there joy, ease, and lightness in what I'm doing?
I like that. It's a good test.
Because when you're resisting, when you're trying to force things to be a certain way, you create this
Tension.
yeah, and suffering.
It's like you're carrying around all this extra baggage.
And surrender is about setting it down and moving freely.
Yeah, it makes me think about all those times I was so fixated on a particular outcome, like my way was the only way. And
You missed out on other possibilities.
exactly. And this leads us to another key part of the power of now that I found both challenging and liberating. His perspective on happiness and unhappiness.
Yeah, that's a pretty radical idea.
It is, especially in a culture obsessed with happiness.
Yeah, but he's saying that both happiness and unhappiness are just temporary.
Fleeting.
Yeah, and true peace is beyond both of them.
It's like everything we've been taught is wrong.
He's not saying we should never experience joy or anything, but he's saying it's more about recognizing those as temporary states. Like our true nature is beyond all that.
It reminds me of that Buddhist teaching about attachment and suffering. Like the more we cling to things, the more we suffer when things change.
Exactly, and that goes for emotions too. We get so attached to feeling a certain way.
Yeah, and then we resist anything that might like disrupt that.
Like we become afraid of sadness or anger or anything that we label as negative.
And that resistance, Tolle says, is what actually causes more. Yeah, it's like by trying to hold on to happiness, we actually push it away.
He uses this great analogy of a deep lake. So the surface of the lake is like all the outer circumstances of our lives, the changing weather patterns of emotions and events.
But deep down, the lake is always... So
Something.
even when things are chaotic on the surface, we can access that deeper stillness.
Exactly, and that's what he means by finding peace beyond happiness and unhappiness.
That sounds incredible, but how do we get there? What can we actually do to experience that?
Well, he says one of the best things you can do is just notice your own resistance
Resistance to.
to anything,
Mhm.
like clinging to a specific outcome or trying to push away unpleasant feelings or just resisting what is.
So developing that witness consciousness,
Right. Just observing without.
judgment.
Yeah. And as we become more aware of those patterns, we can start to loosen their grip,
Mhm. Yeah.
and we can respond to life's challenges in a different way.
From a place of greater presence, which brings us to what might be the most, I don't know, radical idea in the whole book. This idea that even suffering can be a path to enlightenment.
Yeah. We're so conditioned to avoid pain at all costs.
But he's saying that by resisting suffering, we're actually just making it worse. So
Worse.
it's like by pushing away the pain, we just give it more.
Energy.
Yeah, he even compares it to like walking into a dark room. If you try to fight the darkness, you're just going to bump into things. But if you let it be, your eyes will adjust.
It's a great analogy.
So we have to bring that same acceptance to our emotional pain.
Don't try to fix it. Don't try to deny it. Just
Let it be.
and in that space, something amazing can happen. You might realize that the pain isn't as unbearable as you thought.
Like creating space allows it to breathe.
Exactly. And it takes us back to the idea of the ego, that false sense of self. And Tolle says that suffering can help us dismantle the ego.
It can show us that we are not our pain.
And that realization can change everything, including our relationships.
Oh, yeah, which is another big part of the power of now enlightened relationships. I love how he talks about love not being something we find, but a state of.
Being.
Yes. Like, it's not about finding the perfect person to complete you.
It's about becoming whole yourself.
So you can share that wholeness with someone else.
And a big part of that is the ability to really listen.
And really listen.
Yeah.
Not just with our minds, but with our whole being.
He talks about feeling the energy field of your inner body as you listen. And it creates a space where you can connect with the other person beyond just their words.
It's a different way of listening.
It is. It's about dropping your own agenda and just being present with them.
Wow, it makes me think of all the times I haven't really been present for the people I care about.
Yeah, we've all been there. But the good news is it's something you can practice.
You can learn to listen more deeply.
And as we become more present in our relationships, it allows for, a different kind of love to emerge.
A more unconditional love.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that more next time.
That idea of like surrendering to suffering, it's pretty tough to really grasp,
It goes against everything we think we know, right? Like avoiding pain is just instinct.
But what if, like he says, that's actually what keeps us trapped in the cycle?
Yeah, that by pushing it away, we're actually giving it more power.
And more energy.
He has this analogy about a dark room. You
Yeah.
walk into a dark room. If you try and fight the darkness, you're just going to stumble around and bump into stuff. But if you just let it be,
Your eyes adjust.
yeah,
So it's bringing that same kind of acceptance to emotional pain.
not trying to fix it or deny it.
Just letting it be.
And when you do that, when you create that space, something can happen. You might realize the pain isn't as intense as you thought.
Like giving it space to breathe almost.
Yeah, and it connects back to that idea of the ego, the false sense of self. And Tolle says that suffering can actually help dismantle that ego.
Like help us see that we're not our pain.
Right. And that realization can change everything, even our relationship.
Which is another big topic in the book, enlightened relationships. And I really like how he says that love isn't something we find, but it's more like
State of being.
yeah. And that it's not about like finding the perfect person.
Yeah, it's about
Becoming whole.
exactly. So you can share that wholeness with someone else.
And a big part of that is learning to truly listen, not just with our
Oh, my.
but with our whole being.
He talks about feeling the energy field of your inner body
Yeah.
as you listen.
Yeah.
And it creates this space where you can connect with the other person on a deeper level.
Beyond words.
Yeah, it's like a different way of listening.
It really is. It's about letting go of your own judgments and just
Being present.
yeah, and it makes me think about all the times I haven't really been present for people I care about.
It's something we all struggle with.
But it's something we can work on.
It's a practice.
So we've talked about a lot in this deep dive into the power of now, Tolle's own awakening, the challenges of the mind, the importance of presence, and even how suffering can be transformative and these enlightened relationships. What are some of the things that really stuck with you?
I think what really resonates with me is this idea that true freedom, true peace, it's not something we achieve later, but it's something we can access right now by just shifting our awareness.
Choosing to be present.
Exactly. And it means we're not just victims of circumstance, you know? We always have a choice.
We can choose to stay stuck in the past or worry about the future, or we can choose to be here now.
Tolle says the present moment is all you ever have.
That's powerful. And so for everyone who wanted a deep dive into the power of now, hopefully this conversation has given you a good taste.
And maybe spark some curiosity to explore
Great.
further.
We really encourage you to try some of the things we've talked about, like bring awareness to your breath, to the sensations in your body. Notice when you're resisting, and just gently bring yourself back to the present moment.
And remember, don't chase happiness, Tolle says. If you seek it, you won't find it.
Instead, just be present, be accepting, be grateful for this moment.
And see what happens.
We hope you found this deep dive inspiring, and until next time, be well, and may you find peace in the power of now.